Welcome back then folks to of course day 4 of Special Projects pack number 15, this time the only rally build of this particular pack. Usually I do at least a couple, but for this time around it's a fictional build of an RGT spec KTM X-Bow. Of course they do the GT4 track day racing kind of stuff, but not so much a rally car. And for this one I decided to look up the correct power to weight ratio of RGT cars. So this one actually meets those regulations, at least in terms of how much power it would need to have to match the correct ratio with 990 kilos, which of course is already quite a lot heavier than a standard crossbow, because I wanted to make it a bit fairer, you know, not too much of a weight advantage over something like the Porsche, etc. But the weird thing is, it ends up being quite far off the pace, despite the fact that, as you'll see later on, it is not the kind of car which you are holding back with by any means. So I don't know if maybe the other cars had way more power and it wasn't quite a fair comparison. I don't know. It may have something to do with the fact that RGT is more tarmac-based rally, and because we're actually using it as a rally car, it's not quite powerful enough, maybe, to keep up the pace. That could be it, I guess. I feel like it's probably a combination of that and that the other cars probably have a bit too much power in comparison to their weight, but I'm not sure. Now, in terms of the parts, I initially built this to be a far more powerful rally car, so there's a lot of stuff which you don't actually need to fit, and of course we'll run through that as we go through. So we've got nothing here, first of all, for the sports section. For the club sports section, we've got the power restrictor, the ballast, and of course the dirt tyres and or snow tyres, depending on where you plan to take it. The fully customised computer, you do not need to buy the low RPM turbo. We've got the fully customised manual box, the limited slip diff. I have increased the rigidity on this one. The weight reduction, of course, doesn't apply there. The anti-lag is fitted, so you can go for that one. Again, with the exhaust, the filter, the manifold, you don't need any of this stuff. Of course, we have gone for the racing pads and discs. It's your choice, as always, if you want vented, drilled, carbon ceramic, that's all up to you. The race clutch and flywheel, of course the race suspension, as far as the extreme stuff, the hydraulic handbrake for manoeuvrability, and likewise the turn-in with the steering angle adapter. And for the ultimate stuff, there's nothing fitted, so it really is a very, very basic build. We've hardly done anything technically compared to a standard crossbow. In fact, we've made it worse in one major way, which is that it's far heavier. Now, of course, you could feasibly have the weight a lot lower than this, but then, again, if you want to have the correct regulations, which, if I recall, I think was something like 293 horsepower per tonne, I think it is, or maybe 296, something like that. So if you want to keep it to those actual regulations, you do have to penalise the power quite a lot. So if you have it down to like 800 kilos instead of 990, or something like that, you're going to really be suffering on power. You'll have like 100 horsepower or something at that point. So as far as the tyres, of course, those are fitted. For the suspension, we've got 140 mils, so the highest setting, 4 for the anti-roll, 25 and 45 for the dampers, 2.75 for the springs, little bit of a difference on the front and the back for camber, 2 on the front, 3 on the rear. For toe, none on the back, 0.10 out on the front. As far as the diff, 10, 20 and 40. I like that particular setup, so give it a try and see what you think. For the auto setting on the manual transmission, we've got 260 kilometers an hour, so not too far over like 160-ish miles an hour, which is more than quick enough for most rally tracks. For the ballast, like I said, 200 kilos, then we've got that put all the way to the front to technically make it a bit more of a front-biased vehicle. Might seem counterintuitive for an already rear-wheel drive car. It could be two-tail happy, but it actually works quite well on this, and I think part of the reason why is because of how short the wheelbase is, especially compared to how wide the vehicle is overall. We've got 93% on the power restrictor, no restriction on the ECU. Of course, the downforce is not adjustable, but it does at least have a decent amount anyway. The anti-lag I've got on strong, and like I said, we've got none of those other parts actually fitted at all anyway. So it's a very, very simple, very straightforward build, and especially on dirt tyres, even the point level is really not that high at all. So obviously, now we need to jump out to a dirt track on this occasion, and show you what it can do in practice. Now, like I said, this is a really weird one, because you'll see me driving here, and you can tell I'm not going slow. I'm not holding back on this car. And the way that I would recommend driving it is 2 things in particular. Number 1, you need to attack corners in this car. You need to throw it in and essentially use the racing line as if you were on the tarmac. So obviously don't showboat, don't try to get the tail out, you'll do that anyway, so just focus on taking the racing line, the rest takes care of itself. More importantly though, and this really is essential to keep up any kind of pace, don't really use the brakes until you really have to. So like for a hairpin turn, something like that, then sure, but for most corners, what I would recommend is put it in manual mode, of course, and just change down a gear. that will naturally give you enough deceleration to then swing it into a corner, and this really is one of those builds where after a couple of laps you'll get much more of a hang for the car. Weirdly enough though, even with the kind of pace that I'm throwing this thing around at, and even with those things applied, it's no way near the lap times of the other cars, which is so strange. It's like barely under a minute 30, which is crazy because you can see how this thing is taking corners. I think it's because it just doesn't have the straight line power and the power coming out of curves, which is a shame. You'd think a car that has near enough 300 horses and less than a ton should be more than quick enough, but something just, it's not quite there as far as the pace, which is weird. You could definitely still use the car and have a lot of fun with it, of course, and for AI I'm sure you'd wipe the floor with them, but against the other builds which I've done, which I'm sure must technically have too good of a power to weight ratio or something like that, it is a bit of a weird one. So if you've got a crossbow, maybe you're not using it for everything, or for anything even, then it's a fascinating alternative way of using a KTM, and of course they do have roots in some dirt competition as well with their bikes, so it's kind of apropos. So of course, check out the build. If you've got one lying around, give it a try, and of course stick around for the couple of special projects left this week, one later on today of course, and naturally check out the ones which we've already done earlier in the week. But for now, thanks for watching.